I never imagined I'd end up like this, parked at my kitchen table, gazing at a blank checkbook with a hollow ache in my heart. My name's Evelyn, and at 67, life's taken on a quieter, tougher edge since my husband passed 5 years ago. Robert always took care of our money matters. I used to laugh that I couldn't manage a checkbook even if it was a matter of life and death. And now, here I am, facing that very challenge. After Robert's funeral, I could barely drag myself out of bed. Grief consumed me completely, like a heavy fog I couldn't escape. My only daughter, Amanda, stepped in to help. She'd drop off groceries, sort through my mail, and make sure I took my pills. Some nights, she'd crash on my couch just to be there for me. I was so grateful, beyond grateful, and filled with pride for her. One evening, as we sipped tea together, she said, "Mom, let me take care of the bills for you. You've been through so much already," she added softly. It felt like a gift, a weight lifted off my shoulders. Amanda's always been sharp, especially with numbers. She runs her own home like a pro, juggling her husband, 3 kids, a mortgage, and school fees, yet still makes time for me. When she suggested moving my pension to an account she could manage for me, it felt like an act of love. "This way, you won't have to mess with online banking," she said kindly. "I'll make sure all your bills are paid on time, and you can just relax." The last thing I wanted was more stress. Worry had already worn me down to my bones. So, I agreed without hesitation. She helped me fill out forms to redirect my Social Security and small retirement fund payments. We set up a joint account at her bank, and she promised to track every penny carefully. "Complete openness, Mom," she said with that same bright smile she'd flash when she brought home straight A's. "You deserve to take it easy now." For a while, I did just that. My fridge was always full, my bills were paid on time, and Amanda stopped by every few days with a coffee and a warm hug. She even treated me to shopping trips, insisting on paying with her card. "I want to spoil you a bit," she'd say. "It's the least I can do." I felt so fortunate. I'd heard awful stories about lonely seniors getting conned by strangers. But my Amanda, my sweet girl, would never let anything like that happen to me. When bank statements arrived, I didn't bother checking them closely. I left those to her, too. "They're just dull numbers, Mom," she'd say. "Trust me, it's all under control." And I did, why wouldn't I? But sometimes, in the quiet of the night, with only the soft hum of my fridge for company, a tiny knot would twist in my stomach. A vague question I couldn't quite name. A faint whisper of unease. I'd push it aside, like swatting away a pesky bug. Maybe it was guilt for leaning on her so much. Or maybe just that old worry creeping back in. Amanda's my family, my only family. When you've got just one person left in the world, you cling to them, right? Even if, deep down, that hold starts to sting a little. It began with small things, like Amanda sorting through my mail and setting aside the important stuff for me. The rest she'd toss out, calling it junk I didn't need to bother with. One afternoon, she showed up with that determined look she gets when she's on a mission, her laptop tucked under one arm and a stack of papers in her hand, her voice sweet as honey. "Mom, I've been thinking about something," she said, settling into the chair across from me. "All this shuffling between your accounts, it's not secure. You know how many older folks get scammed every day, don't you?" I nodded slowly, my mind flashing to news stories about seniors losing everything to phone scams or fake charities. It was terrifying, and I didn't want to be one of those victims. "I'm just worried about you," she continued. "What if you accidentally click a bad link or someone tricks you over the phone? It happens all the time." I hated feeling so vulnerable, but she had a point. I'd almost given my Social Security number to a fake Medicare caller once. If Amanda hadn't stepped in, I might have been in big trouble. So, when she reached over and gently squeezed my hand, I didn't pull back. "Here's my idea," she said softly. "Let's have your pension go straight into the account I use for household expenses. I'll handle the bills, buy your groceries, and keep your prescriptions filled. You won't even have to think about money. Doesn't that sound wonderful?" It sounded almost too perfect. But won't I lose track of where my money's going? I asked hesitantly. She gave me that reassuring smile, tilting her head. Of course not, Mom. I'll show you everything, printouts every month, every dollar accounted for. I just want to keep you safe, she said again. Safe, that word hit me hard. I was tired of worrying about forgotten passwords or clicking the wrong thing online. I wanted someone to lift that burden, and who better than my daughter? So, I said yes. We called Social Security and the pension office together. Amanda filled out all the forms, then handed them to me to sign. I didn't read them carefully, I trusted her completely. Why wouldn't I? She's my daughter, my only child, with a busy life, a good job, and a family of her own. She was doing this out of love, or so I thought. That first month, she showed me a neat spreadsheet listing groceries, pharmacy costs, and utility bills. Everything looked perfectly in order. I hugged her, thanked her, even teared up a bit. She laughed and brushed it off. Mom, you're retired now, relax. Let me deal with the tedious stuff. So, I let go. Month after month, the money came in, and she'd tell me how it was spent. Sometimes she'd show me a receipt, but usually, it was just a quick summary. Gas prices are up, she'd say, or your insurance jumped a little, but I took care of it. I felt looked after, shielded, maybe even a bit pampered. But letting go has a way of sneaking up on you. You don't realize what's slipping away until it's already gone. Looking back, I see how smoothly she pulled it off. Not with harsh words or demands, but with kindness, or something dressed up as kindness. Trust, when you give it away without question, can turn into a tether. And I didn't even feel it tightening. Not yet. At first, it was just tiny things, so small I thought I was making them up. A missed grocery run one week, a delayed prescription pickup the next. Amanda, always so on top of things, started slipping. Sorry, Mom, I'll grab your pills tomorrow, she'd say when I mentioned my blood pressure meds. The pharmacy was out today. I took her at her word, why wouldn't I? But then it happened again the next month, and the month after that. One time, I went 4 whole days without my medication. I sat in my living room, dizzy and sweaty, sipping lukewarm tea, telling myself it was just a hot flash, even though I haven't had one in over a decade. When I finally brought it up with Amanda, her usual warm smile was nowhere to be found. She looked annoyed, her eyes sharp with frustration. Mom, I'm doing all I can here, she snapped, tossing a grocery bag onto the counter with a thud. I've got 3 kids, a full-time job, and now I'm handling your life too, give me a break, please. Her words stung like a sudden slap across the face. I mumbled an apology, feeling small, like a kid who'd done something wrong. I told myself she was just worn out, carrying too much on her shoulders. I didn't want to add to her load or seem ungrateful. Still, something felt wrong, like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. The detailed monthly reports she used to share stopped showing up. When I asked about where my money was going, she'd brush me off with a quick, "It's all handled, Mom," or, "You wouldn't believe how much groceries cost now." She'd laugh, but her eyes stayed cold, distant. One day, I worked up the nerve to ask for a bank statement, and she hit me with, "What, you don't trust me anymore?" That hurt deep, like a knife twisting in my chest. I did trust her, or at least, I wanted to. I just needed to feel like I still had some control over my own life. But I backed off, afraid of starting an argument. I kept telling myself I was lucky to have her help at all. Then I started picking up on other changes, little things that added up. She stopped lingering for our usual tea chats. Her visits became quick, like she couldn't wait to leave. She'd be halfway out the door before I could even ask about her kids. Sometimes, days would pass without her stopping by. Once, I ran out of bread and ate canned soup for 4 straight meals, waiting for her to show up. When I called, it went straight to voicemail. Hours later, I'd get a text, "Swamped with work, Mom. I'll swing by tomorrow." But tomorrow always came later than promised. One day stands out in my memory, sharp as a photograph. I'd asked Amanda to grab some yarn for a blanket I was crocheting. It was a small thing, but it gave me something to focus on. She forgot, again. When I gently reminded her, she rolled her eyes and muttered, "You always need something, don't you?" I acted like I didn't hear it, but those words burned. I started keeping a little notebook, jotting down what I asked her to buy, when I asked, and what she actually brought. It wasn't about catching her in a lie, I just needed to make sense of the confusion swirling around me. Everything felt like it was slipping away, like trying to hold water in my hands. I used to feel secure, taken care of. Now, I felt like a shadow in my own home. I tried to convince myself it was just a rough patch. Maybe Amanda was stretched too thin, juggling too much. Maybe I just needed to be patient and give her time. But at night, lying in bed, staring at the dark ceiling, a chill of doubt would slip in, like a draft sneaking under the door. One evening, I noticed the house was colder than usual, the heater hadn't kicked on. I checked the thermostat, and its screen flashed, low battery. I rummaged through the closet where I kept spare batteries, but the shelf was bare. I wondered if Amanda had used them and forgotten to replace them. That night, I huddled under 3 blankets, my teeth chattering, whispering to myself like a mantra, "She'll take care of it tomorrow. She's just tired. It'll be okay." But deep down, a truth was starting to take root. Something wasn't right. The daughter who used to hover over me with care now seemed to bristle at my existence. I didn't know how, or if, I could ever bring her back to the way things were. I didn't realize it then, but this was just the start of something bigger. My house used to hum with life, Amanda's laughter echoing from the kitchen, the patter of her kids' feet racing down the hall, cartoons blaring while I whipped up sandwiches for them. I'd look forward to weekends when they'd burst through the door like a happy tornado. Those sounds meant love, meant family. But bit by bit, that warmth faded away. Amanda's visits became rare, always with an excuse: work piling up, school projects, a sick kid, car trouble. At first, I bought it. I knew how hectic life could be. I'd raised her while juggling a job and a home myself. I tried not to let it hurt. But then weeks would go by without her stopping by. When I called, she'd pick up sounding frazzled. "Mom, I'm in the middle of a meeting," or "I'll call you back soon." That callback never came. Sometimes, I'd leave voicemails just to hear my own voice, as if that could fill the quiet. I stopped asking when the kids would visit. I didn't want to sound desperate. I told myself they were growing up, busy with their own lives. But passing the dusty board games in the closet or the empty cookie jar I used to keep stocked for them made my heart heavy. My days blurred into one long, lonely routine. I'd wake up and make a small breakfast, if I had bread. Some days, I didn't. I got by on canned soup and crackers, stretching my pills by breaking them in half to make them last until Amanda remembered to refill them. She stopped checking in with a quick call. The phone sat silent, gathering dust on its charger. I'd stare at it, hoping it would ring, but it rarely did. The quiet wasn't calm, it was deafening. It filled the spaces where laughter and chatter used to live. I tried to keep busy with puzzles, crocheting, or old novels, but nothing felt right. Even the TV couldn't hold my attention. I'd lose track of the shows halfway through. At night, the loneliness pressed down like a heavy blanket. I'd lie awake, thinking of the days after Robert died, how Amanda held me as I sobbed, promising I'd never be alone. "We're a team, Mom," she'd said. But now, it felt like I was fading away. Sometimes, I'd sit by the window, watching the street, hoping to see her car pull up. It almost never did. One day, I saw a mom and her daughter walking hand in hand, laughing together, and it broke me. I had to look away, pretending I had something in my eye. One Sunday, I dug out an old can of soup from the pantry, 3 years past its expiration date, but I ate it anyway. I didn't want to bother Amanda or seem like too much trouble. That night, I wrapped myself in the old shawl my mother knitted, whispering into the empty room, "I miss you." I wasn't sure if I meant Amanda or the person I used to be. The house stayed silent, and I was on my own. It was a gray Thursday afternoon, the house quieter than ever. I decided to tidy the kitchen's junk drawer, just to feel like I was doing something useful. It was stuffed with dried-out pens, old rubber bands, crumpled notes, and a flashlight that hadn't worked in years. As I sorted through the mess, I spotted something tucked under a pile of faded grocery lists, a receipt. It was glossy, the kind you get from a fancy store. I almost tossed it, but something stopped me. I smoothed it out, slid my glasses on, and my stomach dropped. It was from a high-end boutique downtown, the kind with sleek windows and handbags displayed like museum pieces. I'd passed it once years ago and thought, who has the money for a place like that? Amanda's name was printed at the top, dated 3 months back. The total, $2,147.89 for a single handbag. I read it over and over, waiting for the numbers to shift. They didn't. My stomach churned like I'd swallowed a stone. At first, I tried to make excuses for her, telling myself maybe it was a gift for someone special. Maybe she'd paid for it with her own savings. Maybe it was just a mix-up at the store. But those nagging doubts clung to me like damp clothes. Why was a receipt with her name hiding in my drawer? I sank into a chair at the kitchen table, the receipt gripped in my hand, my tea growing cold beside me. The quiet in the house wasn't just lonely anymore, it carried a weight, thick with suspicion, guilt, and a sense of betrayal. I replayed her words in my mind, all those times she'd sighed, "Mom, things are tight this month," or "I didn't have enough cash for the pharmacy." I thought about eating that expired soup, about splitting my pills to make them last. I remembered that freezing night, wrapped in 3 blankets, while she was out buying a handbag that cost more than what I spend on groceries in a month. Tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them, not just for the money, but for what it might mean. Had she been deceiving me all along? I racked my brain, trying to recall if I'd ever asked for proof, if I'd ever questioned how my pension was being spent. I hadn't. I'd trusted her completely, she was my daughter, after all. She'd promised to look after me, and I'd handed over the reins without a second thought. I stayed at that table until the light faded, clutching the receipt like it was evidence from a crime I hadn't known was happening. My mind churned with memories that now felt different, her shiny new shoes, her fancy upgraded phone, her perfectly manicured nails, even when she swore she was barely getting by. Meanwhile, I was skipping meals and apologizing for existing. That night, I slipped the receipt under my pillow before bed, as if keeping it close might make it less real. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. Doubt had taken root, and it was spreading fast. I couldn't erase what I'd seen, couldn't ignore what I was starting to suspect. I didn't know my next step, but one thing was certain, I needed the truth, no matter how much it would hurt. I held on to that receipt for 4 days before I found the nerve to bring it up. Part of me clung to hope that there was an easy explanation, that I'd misread the numbers, that she'd laugh and say, "Mom, that wasn't your money." But another part, the part that had gone hungry and cold, knew better. Amanda stopped by late on a Saturday evening after I called and said we needed to talk. Her voice on the phone had an edge of irritation, but she agreed to come for a quick visit. She didn't even shrug off her coat, just stood by the door, arms crossed, phone clutched in her hand. I offered her a cup of tea, but she waved it off. I sat at the kitchen table and slid the receipt toward her. "What's this about?" she asked, barely glancing at it. "It's got your name on it," I said softly. "From that fancy boutique on Main Street. Over $2,000, Amanda. I don't shop at places like that. I don't have that kind of cash." Her eyes sharpened, narrowing at me. "What are you getting at, Mom?" "I'm just asking," I said, my voice shaky. "Did you use my pension for this?" She let out a harsh scoff. "Are you kidding me right now? You really think I'm stealing from you?" "I don't want to think that," I whispered. "But I've been scraping by, missing meals, stretching my meds, and then I find this. It doesn't add up." That's when she exploded. She slammed her hand on the table, making me jump. You're unbelievable. After all I've done for you, handling your bills, your groceries, your prescriptions, and this is my thanks. You digging through my stuff, accusing me of being a thief? I just need to understand, I begged. Please, just explain it to me. Her face twisted with fury. You're paranoid and ungrateful. Do you have any idea how hard it is to manage my life and yours? Maybe if you'd been better with money, we wouldn't even be having this fight. Her words cut deep, like a blade to an old wound. She knew I'd always struggled with finances, that's why I leaned on her in the first place. She grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door. I didn't come here to be insulted, she snapped. Maybe you should deal with your own damn money if you think I'm such a liar. The screen door slammed behind her, the sound ringing in my ears. I sank onto the porch, my legs shaky, my heart heavier than ever. I wanted to chase after her, to apologize, to take it all back. But I couldn't move. Deep down, I knew this wasn't just a misunderstanding or a heated argument. It was betrayal. The envelope sat on the kitchen counter for hours, its crisp edges taunting me. I'd moved it from the porch to the table, telling myself it was just another bank notice, nothing urgent. But something about it gnawed at me, a quiet instinct, like the prickle on your neck when a storm's coming. I'd trusted Amanda with so much, my finances, my home, my heart. She'd always had a way of making me feel safe, like she was the daughter who'd never let me down. Until she did. When I finally tore open the envelope, my hands trembled. The words on the page blurred through my tears, but they were sharp enough to cut. Unauthorized transactions. Overdrawn accounts. A line of credit I'd never applied for, siphoning money I'd saved over decades of scrimping and working overtime. My name was on every document, but the handwriting wasn't mine. It was hers. Amanda's. I sank into a chair, the paper crumpling in my grip. The kitchen, once filled with her laughter and the clatter of her kids' toys, felt like a tomb. I could still see her here, just last month, stirring a pot of chili and promising to handle the bills so I could rest easy. Rest easy. The phrase burned in my mind, a cruel mockery of the trust I'd placed in her. I'd rocked her through fevers as a child, braided her hair for school dances, co-signed her first car loan. And now, she drained me, not just of money, but of the belief that I'd raised someone who could love me back. The porch became my refuge that night. I wrapped myself in an old quilt, the one my mother had stitched, and let the cold October air numb my skin. The stars were faint, smothered by clouds, and the silence of the rural night pressed against me. I cried until my throat ached, not just for the money or the betrayal, but for the years I'd spent building a life for us, only to watch it unravel. I'd been her rock, her safe place. To her, I'd become a means to an end. The next morning, I drove to the bank, the envelope clutched in my hand like evidence. The teller, a young woman with kind eyes, listened as I explained, my voice shaking but steady. She didn't judge, didn't look at me like I was the foolish old woman Amanda had painted me as. "We'll start an investigation," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "This happens more than you think." Her words were a small comfort, a reminder that I wasn't alone in my naivety. Back home, I started digging. I pulled out every statement, every receipt I'd let pile up, trusting Amanda's assurances that she had it under control. The deeper I went, the clearer the picture became, months of small withdrawals, transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, even a second mortgage I hadn't signed. Each discovery was a fresh wound, but it also lit a fire in me. I wasn't just a victim. I was a fighter, always had been. I called a lawyer that afternoon, a no-nonsense woman recommended by a neighbor who'd overheard the rumors Amanda was spreading. "You're not the first to go through this," she said, echoing the teller. "Family can hurt you the deepest." She outlined my options, freezing accounts, filing fraud claims, even pressing charges. The thought of legal action against Amanda made my stomach twist, but so did the thought of letting her walk away unscathed. That night, I sat at the kitchen table again, a notebook open in front of me. I wrote down everything, not just the facts, but the feelings. The pride I'd felt watching Amanda grow, the pain of her betrayal, the slow awakening to my own strength. I wasn't writing to confront her or to prove anything to the town. I was writing to remember who I was before her lies tried to redefine me. The stars were brighter that night as I stepped onto the porch again, the quilt draped over my shoulders. The loneliness still ached, but it was different now, not just a void, but a space where I could rebuild. Amanda had taken so much, but she couldn't take my truth. And as I stood there, breathing in the crisp air, I knew I'd find a way to reclaim what was mine. One step at a time. But a gut feeling told me this one was different. I settled at the table, slipped on my glasses, and carefully tore open the envelope. At first, the words didn't make sense. Overdrawn. Outstanding balance. Loan default. My pulse quickened as I read the letter again and again. It said my pension account had been overdrawn for months. Worse, a personal loan taken out in my name had gone unpaid. The bank was demanding $15,672.43 immediately, or they'd pursue legal action. I felt lightheaded, my hands shaking as I set the letter down. A loan? I'd never applied for one. I hadn't stepped foot in a bank in over 2 years. My income was fixed, just my modest pension and Social Security. I'd never take such a reckless risk. But there it was, in black and white, my name, my Social Security number, my account. I looked at the detective, my jaw dropping. Are you saying other people's kids do things like this too? He gave a slow nod. It's called elder financial abuse, and if we can prove what your daughter did, it could be a felony. That word, felony, hit me like a kick to the stomach. I sat there, unable to move, my heart split in half. I never raised Amanda to be a criminal. I never dreamed I'd be in a police station, even thinking about pressing charges against my own child. But there I was, caught in a nightmare. The detective asked if I wanted to proceed, if I was ready to file charges. I didn't answer right away. How do you pick between justice and your own daughter? How do you choose between saving your future and ruining hers? I stared at the forged signature in my lap, a painful reminder. Maybe the real question was, why was I the one forced to make this impossible choice? When I finally decided to press charges, I knew it would stir up trouble, but I wasn't prepared for the chaos that followed. Word got around fast, like wildfire in a dry field. Within days, my phone was buzzing with calls and texts, not offering support, but dripping with judgment. My sister Diane called first, her voice cutting like a knife. You went to the police about your own daughter, Evelyn, she snapped. Have you completely lost it? I tried to explain, the forged signature, the loan, the bank statements showing my money was gone, but Diane wasn't interested in the truth. She wanted our family to stay picture perfect, no matter the cost. She called me dramatic, insisted I must have gotten it wrong, and then stopped picking up my calls. Then came the cousins, the nephews, even some of Amanda's friends I barely knew, all saying the same thing. How could you do this to her? The kitchen clock ticked relentlessly, each second a reminder of the emptiness that had settled into my home. I sat at the worn oak table, a mug of tea gone cold in my hands, staring at the framed photo on the wall, me and Amanda at her high school graduation, her arms slung around my shoulders, both of us grinning like the world was ours. I'd raised her like my own after her mother passed, poured every ounce of love and strength into giving her a life I never had. And now, that same girl was rewriting our history, turning me into a stranger in my own town. Amanda's lies spread like wildfire. She'd always had a knack for storytelling, even as a kid, weaving tales that could make you laugh or cry on command. But this was different. This was deliberate, a calculated unraveling of my reputation. At the grocery store, Mrs. Carter, who'd taught me Sunday school decades ago, averted her eyes when I passed. The diner where I'd shared countless coffee-fueled chats with neighbors now felt like a stage where I was the villain. Whispers followed me, about how I'd lost it, how I'd turned on poor Amanda, who was only trying to help her confused, aging aunt. The betrayal cut deeper than I could explain. It wasn't just Amanda's lies, it was the ease with which people believed them. Friends I'd known since I was a girl, who'd seen me weather storms, my husband's death, the lean years when I worked 2 jobs to keep Amanda fed and clothed, chose her story over mine without a second thought. They didn't ask questions, didn't call to check on me. They just closed their doors, and the silence they left behind was deafening. Nights were the worst. I'd sit in my armchair, the one my husband used to call the throne, and let the tears come. The house creaked around me, each sound a reminder of how alone I was. No more of Amanda's kids running through the halls, no more of her popping by with a casserole or a half-hearted apology. Just me and the weight of memories I couldn't trust anymore. I'd lie awake, wondering where I went wrong, replaying every moment I could have been stricter, softer, wiser. Had I loved her too much? Not enough? One evening, as the sky burned orange beyond the curtains, I found myself at the kitchen table again, pen in hand. I started writing, not for Amanda or the town, but for me. Page after page, I poured out the truth, every late-night talk, every sacrifice, every time I'd forgiven her when she strayed. I wrote about the day she came to me, eyes swollen from crying, promising she'd change. I wrote about the months I spent piecing myself back together after her betrayal, only to have her twist the knife again with her lies. The words didn't fix anything, but they gave me something to hold on to. They were proof I wasn't the woman Amanda painted me to be. I wasn't confused or bitter or paranoid. I was just human, flawed and hurting, but still standing. I sealed the pages in an envelope, not sure if I'd ever share them, but knowing they existed was enough for now. The next morning, I walked to the post office, the envelope tucked under my arm. The air was crisp, the kind of autumn morning that used to make me feel alive. I passed the church where Amanda and I used to sing hymns together, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the urge to cry. I didn't know if I'd ever reclaim the life I'd lost, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to let her story define me. Not anymore. I dropped the envelope in the mailbox, addressed to nobody, a letter to the universe. Then I turned toward home, my steps a little lighter, my heart a little less heavy. The world might believe Amanda's lies, but I knew the truth. And that was enough to keep going. Sometimes, I doubted everything. Had I gone too far? Should I have kept my mouth shut? Was it worth all this? But in that quiet, something started to change. Without everyone else's voices crowding my head, I began to hear my own. I bought a cheap notebook from the corner store and started writing. I poured out what happened, how it hurt, how it cut me to the bone. Each page felt like letting go of a little poison. With every word, I felt a bit stronger, a bit lighter. I started cooking again, not just canned soup, but real meals, like chicken and potatoes. I dusted off old records and let music fill the living room. In the mornings, I'd sit outside with my tea, letting the sun warm my cheeks, reminding myself I was still here, still fighting. I'd spent my whole life being a mom, a wife, a sister. Now, I was learning to be me, the me who didn't have to beg for love, didn't have to shrink to keep the peace, didn't have to be robbed to feel needed. That woman, scared as she was, had strength. I started looking into elder financial abuse, finding online groups where I read stories from women like me, widows, retirees, grandmas, betrayed by the people they'd given everything for. Suddenly, I didn't feel so alone. I wasn't crazy or cruel. I was brave for speaking out, for saying enough, for refusing to let love be used against me. So, when I glanced at my phone's empty contact list, I didn't cry that day. I just set it down. Maybe losing everyone gave me room to finally find myself. After weeks of tossing and turning, doubting myself, I made a choice that felt like crossing a point of no return. I'd seen a flyer at the library about free legal help for seniors. I almost didn't go, thought it was too late, too complicated, too painful. But a spark inside me, the part that still believed in fairness, pushed me through the doors of a small office on Oak Street. That's where I met Emily, a young lawyer, maybe 35, with bright eyes and a voice full of determination. She listened to my story like it was the only thing that mattered. She didn't cut me off or treat me like I was fragile. When I was done, she said firmly, "We're going to fight this." I nearly broke down right there, tears of relief stinging my eyes. Emily took my case for free. She helped me file paperwork, walked me through every step, and handled calls with the bank and police. I'd never had someone stand up for me like that, not since Robert passed. It felt strange, almost empowering, to have someone in my corner. And Amanda, she didn't see it coming. When she heard I'd gotten a lawyer, my phone exploded with her calls, 12 in one afternoon. Her voicemail swung from tearful apologies to furious accusations. "Mom, why are you doing this to me? You're destroying my life after all I've done for you." I listened to the first message, then blocked her number. For the first time, I wasn't going to let guilt silence me. I was done pretending love excused everything. Amanda could cry or scream all she wanted, I wasn't backing down. Emily said we had a strong case. The forged signature, the unauthorized loan, the bank records, they all pointed to fraud. She even found a state law on financial exploitation that could make the charges tougher. This wasn't just about getting my money back anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity. The legal process dragged on, court things always do. There were hearings, stacks of paperwork, and more meetings than I could keep track of. But I showed up to every single one, standing a bit taller, speaking a bit clearer. I wasn't just chasing justice, I was fighting for the woman Amanda thought would never stand up for herself. The courtroom felt colder than I'd expected, not from the air but from its stark, empty atmosphere. Everything was shades of gray, the walls, the floors, even the faces of the people behind desks and microphones. It was a place where truth came stripped of feelings, laid bare in documents and hard evidence. When I walked in, Amanda was already there, seated at a table. She didn't turn to meet my gaze, didn't even glance my way. Her lawyer leaned in, murmuring something, and she gave a single, rigid nod. She looked worn, her face pale and thinner than I remembered, maybe weighed down by guilt under those harsh courtroom lights. Emily sat next to me, steady and ready, as always. She gave my hand a quick, reassuring squeeze before the judge entered. That small gesture warmed me more than words could express. The hearing unfolded slowly, each step measured and precise. Emily laid out the forged loan documents first, placing my real signature next to the fake for comparison. The difference was clear as day, even to someone who didn't know me. Then came the bank statements, showing thousands withdrawn each month, way more than what groceries or bills could justify. Next were the voicemails, ones Emily had saved, where Amanda's voice swung from tearful pleas to vicious insults, threatening to ruin me if I didn't back off. The room went still as her words echoed through the speakers. Amanda bowed her head, staring at the table. Her lawyer tried to weave a tale, that Amanda was just overwhelmed, that she never meant to hurt me, that it was all a big mix-up. But the evidence spoke louder, and so did I when it was my turn to talk. I kept it brief, telling the judge how I'd trusted Amanda with everything, believed her promises to keep me safe, and how she'd taken not just my money but my sense of security. When I sat down, I noticed my hands were steady for the first time in ages. The judge paused, his silence heavy, before delivering his ruling. He called what happened to me unacceptable, outright criminal. But since Amanda had no prior record and had repaid a small portion, he sentenced her to 2 years of probation and ordered her to pay back the full $15,672.43 over time. She wouldn't go to jail. Strangely, I wasn't upset by that. In that courtroom, with every lie laid bare and every truth finally recognized, I'd already won something bigger. The real victory wasn't the judge's words. It was Amanda's silence. She didn't defend herself once during the hearing, didn't deny a single thing. She just sat there, eyes fixed on the table, no more excuses or manipulations. For the first time, I saw her clearly, not as the little girl I sang to sleep, not as the child who held my hand on her first school day, but as an adult who made choices and now faced their consequences. When the gavel fell, I didn't shed a tear. I stood up, lifted my chin, and walked out without a backward glance. Life without Amanda wasn't suddenly full of sunshine. It was quiet, unfamiliar, and sometimes painfully lonely. The money was mostly gone, and the court-ordered repayments came in small, irregular trickles. It wasn't enough to fix the damage, but I found I didn't care as much anymore. What I'd taken back wasn't just money, it was my freedom. I started small, making a list of every bill and its due date. I asked a kind librarian to show me how to pay them online. At first, I was terrified I'd mess it up, sending money to the wrong place or clicking something I shouldn't. But each time I did it, I felt a little more capable. I signed up for a senior tech class at the community center, starting out as the shy one in the back, too nervous to admit how little I knew. But the group was warm, and soon we were chuckling over coffee, swapping stories about confusing emails and pesky pop-ups. I began walking every morning, just a loop around the block at first, then farther each day. I started smiling at neighbors I'd once been too ashamed to face, and some even smiled back. The oddest thing was how much lighter I felt without Amanda's presence weighing me down. I missed the little girl who used to braid my hair while I read to her, the teenager who sobbed in my arms after her first heartbreak. I'll always grieve for that Amanda. But I didn't miss the heavy burden she'd placed on me these last few years, the fear of saying the wrong thing, the uncertainty of opening an empty cupboard. I stopped being afraid, not of the mailbox, not of the phone, not of checking my bank account. Little by little, I built something new. I planted daisies in the front yard, signed up for an art class just for fun, and even hosted a small tea party for my community group, using mismatched teacups I found at a thrift shop. For the first time in years, my house felt like mine again. People think starting over is for the young, but I'm proof you can do it at any age. Every day, I choose to keep moving, keep healing, keep living with pride. Amanda made her choices, and I made mine. Nearly 10 months had passed since the courtroom. My days had settled into a gentle rhythm, filled with small joys and steady progress. I was finding peace again, bit by bit. Then, on a quiet Friday afternoon, Amanda came back. I was by the window, sipping tea and flipping through the community newsletter, when her car pulled into the driveway. For a moment, I thought I was imagining it. But the car door opened, and there she was. She stood on the porch, looking like the teenager who'd sneak home late, nervous, unsure, her eyes red from crying. She knocked once, then again, softer, like she wasn't sure she was welcome. I opened the door but stayed in the doorway. "Mom," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I'm so sorry." She looked worn, older, like life had been tough without her lies to shield her. "The kids miss you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I miss you." I stood there, staring at Amanda for a long moment. I waited for some part of me to rush forward, to pull her into a hug and cry on her shoulder, but that urge never came. What I felt wasn't anger, or hatred, or even sadness, just an empty calm. Something inside me had shut down, not out of spite, but to protect what was left of me. I turned away from Amanda, my boots scuffing against the gravel path. The air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth, and the late afternoon sky hung low, gray clouds mirroring the heaviness in my chest. I didn't look back, but I could feel her eyes on me, pleading for something I couldn't give. Not anymore. The park was nearly empty, save for a jogger in the distance and a couple of kids chasing each other near the swings. Their laughter felt like a distant echo, a reminder of a time when life seemed simpler, when trust was something I gave freely. I shoved my hands into my jacket pockets, the cold biting at my fingertips, and kept walking toward the old oak tree where we used to sit and talk for hours. Back when I thought Amanda was someone I could lean on. Her betrayal had been a slow burn, not a single moment but a series of choices that chipped away at the foundation we'd built. Lies about where she'd been, excuses that didn't add up, and the final blow, her affair with someone I'd called a friend. She'd apologized before, tearful and desperate, but words can only do so much when actions have already carved out the damage. I stopped under the oak, its gnarled branches stretching out like a protective canopy. My breath came out in short, visible puffs. Forgiving her had been like cutting a weight from my chest, but it didn't erase the scars. I could still feel them, raw and tender, every time I thought of her laugh or the way she used to call me, partner, when we'd tackle some new adventure together. Those memories were tainted now, like photographs left out in the rain. Behind me, I heard her footsteps, hesitant but persistent. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But can't we at least try to?" "Try what?" I turned to face her, my voice sharper than I intended. Her eyes were red, her face pale against the dark scarf wrapped around her neck. She looked smaller than I remembered, like the weight of her own choices had shrunk her. "Amanda, there's no trying left. You don't get to walk back into my life and pretend it's all fixable. Some things don't get fixed, they just get left behind." She flinched, and for a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. But I pushed it down. I'd spent too long carrying her burdens, making excuses for her, believing her promises. I wasn't going to do it again. "I'm not saying this to hurt you," I continued, softening my tone but keeping my resolve. "I mean it when I say I hope you get better. For your kids, for yourself. But I'm not your redemption story. I'm not here to make you feel okay about what happened." She nodded, her gaze dropping to the ground. A single tear fell, catching the dim light before it disappeared into the dirt. I miss you," she whispered. I swallowed hard, the words hitting like a punch I hadn't braced for. Part of me wanted to say I missed her too, the old her, the one I thought I knew. But that person was gone, maybe never real to begin with. Instead, I said, "I hope you find what you're looking for, Amanda. But it's not me." I turned and walked away again, this time with purpose. The park stretched out before me, the path winding toward the horizon. Each step felt lighter, not because the pain was gone, but because I was finally choosing myself. The wind picked up, carrying the faint sound of her sobs, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. "I'm going to close the door now," I said softly. "Please don't come back unless I invite you." I shut the door slowly, without anger, and turned the lock. It wasn't about revenge or victory, it was about peace. The woman on the other side wasn't the daughter I raised, and I'd finally made peace with the fact that love doesn't mean letting someone hurt you again. These days, my life is quiet, but it belongs to me. I live simply in my little house, with its squeaky floors and flower boxes blooming out front. My pension, though smaller now, goes straight to my account. I check the balance myself, no one else. Paying my bills with my own hands, once so daunting, now feels like a small triumph. At 67, I've become something I never expected, a speaker. 3 times a month, I visit senior centers and community groups to talk about something no one wants to believe: financial abuse from your own family. I share my story, not to drag Amanda's name, but to shed light on the truth. I stand before rooms full of kind, weary eyes, women like me who'd give their all for their kids and sometimes lose themselves along the way. I tell them straight, love your children, but guard your independence. Trust, but always check. Protect your name, your signature, your value. They often cry, and sometimes I do too. After one talk, a woman squeezed my hand and whispered, "I thought I was alone." You're never alone, that's both the heartbreak and the solace. I still think about Amanda sometimes. I wonder if she's changed, if she's doing okay. I pray her kids grow up learning better. I hope they break the pattern. But I don't regret shutting that door. She took my money, sure, but I reclaimed something far more precious: my dignity, my peace, my life. I smile more these days. I laugh freely. I sleep without double-checking the locks. On Sundays, I stroll to the farmer's market and buy fresh bread and flowers, not because I need them, but because they bring me joy. That's a kind of richness I'd forgotten I could have. So, no, I didn't recover all my pension, but I gained something greater, a pension of peace. And I've learned that's worth more than any amount of money.